Hello there, Servum17 once again. This is my Splinter Cell High Definition Collection hard video walkthrough. This is mission 1. It is called Tbilis, or Tbilis? I'm not too sure how you pronounce that. Tbilis Police Precinct. Whoa, I can't even say precinct, that's the easy word. It's the police precinct. And this is, of course, Splinter Cell, Ubisoft's stealth magnum opus, I would probably say. Because before there was Assassin's Creed, there was this. And I absolutely adored this game when it first came out. However, on this high definition collection, you're going to see some interesting things happening throughout these videos. And I need to warn you of a few things before we really get into this guide and the things that you're going to need to know to beat the game. This port is a horrendous port. I have been known to say not very generous things towards Ubisoft, but fundamentally they're usually pretty tight with things. This is not tight whatsoever. The frame rate on this is utter garbage. I'm not going to be rendering this walkthrough in 60 frames per second because it's just going to highlight just how frequently the frame rate drops, sorry. It's horrendous. It's difficult sometimes to look at because it gets really bad, and it's inexcusable really. They should have made a better job with this because these games deserved better. And then the second thing is the game is completely unstable and it crashes a lot, and I never remember the GameCube version crashing, which is the one I had. And this one crashes all the time, and it's not just, you know, soft crashes and hard crashes in the game. It crashes while it's saving, and if you've never had a crash when a game saves, it affects the save data. There's a reason why games tell you not to turn your computer off when you're saving, or when you're loading, or whenever there's that icon doing things, because it damages the save. So, 2 times in my playthrough, I had a game-destroying crash that ruined my saves. And I had to do entire levels again, and if you're only saving once, which a couple of people will do because they're perhaps not playing as intelligently as they should be, you might have to do the entire game again. So, my first piece of advice is make sure you do hard saves, as well as the auto saves the game gives you, as well as the quick save options you can do as well. It's going to save you in the long run should you have any of those crashes. Who knows, maybe you'll get lucky, you'll not have any of those, but I didn't, and it was incredibly frustrating. So hard mode, what is the difference between the normal game? Well, it's been over 10 years since I played this game, so I couldn't tell you too much, but I can tell you what I think it will be. Just by playing the game, what I've noticed. I assume the enemies are more alert, I assume they do more damage to you, and I assume maybe you have to be a little bit more quiet than you used to have to be on normal. I think that's pretty much the only distinctions here. Throughout this walkthrough I'm going to be doing a few things. The first thing is I will not be using any medkits. If you're getting shot on this game enough to need a medkit, it's probably worth, you know, reloading, because getting spotted ruins almost everything. It's so much easier to use stealth in Splinter Cell than it is to use action, and unfortunately there are a few sequences in this game where you have to do, you know, gun-on-gun action, which is where the game breaks down a lot, and I do think they are jarringly the worst parts of it. But it's obviously a peak and a valley for them. It's a diversity in gameplay, so they were trying something to keep you on the edge of your seat, and it's just the shooting in this game is nowhere near as good as it got in further iterations. But when you're stealthing, the best thing to bear in mind is when you are crouched, of course you're harder to see, you move slower, but that's not the extent of what you have to do here, guys. You unfortunately will have to lightly brush the analog to make Sam move slower, and you can mediate how quickly he crouch walks depending on the pressure you apply to the analog. Of course, if you push fully and move him at full speed, enemies are going to hear you all the time on hard, and the easiest way to know somebody's aware of your presence is the music that's playing right now. It goes into this kind of drum and cymbal repetitive theme of, you know, yo dog, somebody knows something's up, so try and be quiet and hide. And it's super useful, highlighting, you know, when somebody knows where you are before they've seen you. The second thing you need to be aware of, which is going to save your life, is on the bottom right above the pistol hood. You'll notice there is a light bar. The further to the right you are on that bar, the more exposed you are. Watch this. I assumed I would and I didn't. This game is full of really janky, weird detection moments, because it shows a lot of its age, but it's still a fantastic title, and it did a lot of great things for stealth games when it came out. But as I was saying, sorry, the bottom right HUD, when you're on the left where it is now, it means that you're in shadow. The closer to the left you are, the better you are at being concealed. And believe it or not, folks, it's the most important part of the screen. It is the life or death part of the game. If you pay good attention to that, regardless of what your screen looks like, you will be safe. And it's one of the great disconnects that happens in this game, and happens even more so in the sequel because of the dynamic lighting. There are moments where you are stood completely lit up, not in a pool of shadow where the game will tell you that you are in shadow, and vice versa. So you can never 100% trust your eye. And I believe, wholeheartedly, that it's a problem with the game. I think it is just something that was perhaps overlooked, or something that is an infrequent bug. And I hate to call design choices bugs, but I believe it to be true, because there are other moments where you're in, comparable environments, and you're perfectly fine, you never have any problems, but other areas, randomly, it just trips you up. And it has to be, like an oversight, because for the most, the game works surprisingly well considering its age, and there's just a few moments where it's going to catch you out, so you need to be aware of that. A second really interesting thing that this game utilises is the difference in terrain that you step on. So if you step on wood or pebble/granite and stuff like that, different surfaces, you'll get a different response, and depending on how quickly you move will depend on how much noise it makes. So one of the strategic elements of this game is knowing what you're stepping on and stepping on the right things, and there are a lot of different subsets to this that make the game really interesting. Also do you see that just then? That was me trying to jump up here and grab this, but the detection is nowhere near as good as it will be in later games because it's their first attempt at it. So I made a really loud noise. Luckily enough, the guards come and look for it, and I use it as an opportunity to sneak past them. So it works in my favour, and there are 3 strategies similar to this that you're going to see me utilise throughout this walkthrough. Moving when I'm stood up, or moving quickly when I'm crouched close to an enemy to get his attention. Shooting a surface to make him move so I can exploit his positioning, and doing the jump are also things that are going to help. But do you notice how the AI is kind of omniscient? He came from that noise down those staircase all the way over to where I was from his original position. And that's another thing you need to bear in mind here, folks, when you're playing. This is a game that was made back in the days where AI, whenever you tripped an alarm, whenever somebody saw you, everybody saw you, everybody had super insane alertness and accuracy, and they would murder you like aimbots, and this is no different whatsoever. But the good news is this game has perfect checkpoints, and when I say perfect checkpoints, it doesn't have any of them. And I know that might sound kind of contradictory to my views on checkpoints and difficulty and games in the past that have used it as so, but instead it allows you to save, and it allows you to quick save like a PC game. So although the game does not checkpoint and it only auto saves between loaded sequences, which is kind of the end of levels and what have you, it never logs your game. It's entirely up to you, and you can save whenever you want to. It's very quick, it's very useful, and you can quick load just as quick as well. And the whole system, it works beautifully in a stealth game that pretty much is trial and error if you don't know what you're doing, and stealth games have been that for a long time, and it isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just the way the mechanics work. It's about finding that path, it's about learning from mistakes, it's about progressively getting better and more aware about your situation, and the quick save system lets you do that. There are 2 weaknesses to the quick save system, however. The first one, of course, is the crash. If it crashes on the save, that save will be ruined. The ones before it will be fine, but that one will be fucked. And even if it does work, you'll still probably have weird things happen. For instance, I managed to reload a save that had crashed on one, and it put me back in the game and everything was fine. I did another quick save afterwards on that file, and then when I reloaded, it booted me to the XMB on the PlayStation Dash thing. And it would never do it ever again. It kept on loading the game and booting me to the dash. So you want to be super careful with that. It does happen, it sucks, there's nothing you can do. And then the second thing is, because you can save at any moment, you can save yourself into a bad situation. For instance, if you're in a cocky spot and you're very close to an enemy and he's walking past you and you're pretty confident he's not going to see you, but you save and then he does see you, and every time you reload you have to do a really quick movement where he sees you and things, it can turn into a loop of disaster. But if you follow what I do and you see me stand still for any large period of time, that is an opportunity where you can save. That is an opportunity where you can continue to just reinforce your advantage in the gameplay, and it's going to really save your life. What else? By the end of this walkthrough, if you follow it, you'll not use a med pack. You will not die if you follow it as well and get the under 5 death achievement. You will not set off a single alarm, so you'll get that one as well. And I think that's it. For the most, I'm going to try not to kill people. It wasn't a strict guideline while I was playing. I just didn't really want to do it. And I'm also going to try not to use my F2000 as much as I used to when I was a kid, because the gun is insanely powerful if you know how to use it, between the sticky shockers to the ring airfoil rounds to the cameras and things. It's really fun, it's really tricky, and it's really effective, so I'm going to try my best to only use that in moments where A, it's incredibly effective to do so, or B, I was having issue doing other methods. And of course, this opens up the flexibility for you to do exactly what you wish. You can use it the entire duration, you don't have to. It's all your judgment. This right here is interesting too. You'll notice I went behind him and I grabbed him in that manoeuvre there, brought him over here, smacked him, and then dropped him. My preference is to do that over knocking them out, and there's two reasons for this. Knocking them out is slightly easier on the detection, because when you sneak up behind the guards, they can be very, very bullshit and just spin around and start shooting you. Because if you're not ever so lightly brushing the analog, they will hear you every single time. If you're lit up and they catch you out of the corner of their eye, even though they weren't really looking your way, sometimes they'll spot you and it's all over, so you have to be wickedly careful. When you grab them, as I mentioned, it is tougher to do because you have to be closer to them, but you can also move them immediately and you don't have to waste time picking them up. However, they are both incredibly situational, so sometimes it's better to just clop them one and then move them, or just clop them one and progress, depending on, as I've said, the situation. You will see for the most, I will use the grab them from the back and then dump them somewhere, because it's just a little bit quicker, but overall, if you're having trouble doing it, just wait for them and slap them with the elbow. However, if they see you, it will take two, and if you hit them from in front, the first one will do nothing. They just hyper armor through it and shoot you dead. It's pretty rough. And I remember it not so fondly, because Chaos Theory came along 2 games from now, and it gave you a knife. So there was none of the bullshit, you know, clapping them with the elbow and it not putting them down. He just took them out, and it was so empowering and so amazing, yet so simple. But you just witnessed an interesting mechanic just then. And it's an incredibly finicky one that barely works. It's one of those that sometimes you do it perfectly, sometimes you don't, and it's exacerbated by the detection in this game. It's very rudimentary and bad, because games used to have that as a normal thing, you know. Sometimes things just didn't work as well as they could have, and you just put up with it, and this is a great case of it. The jump I did on top of the bin off the wall looked incredibly simple, but I guarantee if you try it and you don't know how to do it, you might jump off things you don't want, you might not grab the wall, you might just straight up fall. It is pretty finicky. But that being said, I absolutely love it. It's stupid, it's superfluous, but it's actually one of the selling points for this game, because when it was first coming out, it was in direct competition with Metal Gear Solid. You know, Metal Gear Solid had already been established, everybody loved it, and, you know, Microsoft was entering the console competition. Everybody was like, what are you doing? You make PCs, get out of here, you know, this kind of attitude. It was very, you know, ostracizing towards them. And then this game was coming along, you know, jostling for the honour of being the best stealth game, you know, a new revolutionary stealth game, and all the Sony fanboys and the Metal Gear Solid fanboys were like, you know, this can't be a good game, what are they on about? And when they were advertising it and they were showing you some of the stuff and they were showing you all the lighting and the stealthing and the night vision goggles, they were also putting emphasis on the wall jumping and the splits jump, and it's the most stupid but amazing thing ever in a game. When a wall is close enough, you can do a Jean-Claude Van Damme and do splits between them, and you can use it to your advantage. However, the game is designed in such a way that there's only about 5 instances where you can actually do it, and only about 2 of those instances are useful for anything other than just doing it for the sake of doing it. And when you bear in mind, Sam Fisher at this point is like late 40s or something, he's kind of the grizzled veteran agent who's been brought back into the fold to do these Black Ops missions, so he's not a spring chicken yet, he's flexible as shit and pulling off all these crazy split jumps. And of course this would be further just bastardized in the fiction, in the canon, as they went on with each of the sequels, as Sam Fisher's kind of the Benjamin Button of the video game world, where he seems to get younger as he ages and his daughter gets older, and there's this really awkward, weird relationship of, is he a dad, is he a boyfriend? Like, why does he look younger now than he did in the first game that was 10 years ago? And then, of course, they changed the voice, didn't they? They got rid of Michael Ironside and brought in that generic dude who did a pretty dumbass job and just made him look even more youthful than he'd ever looked before, and effectively killed the character of Sam Fisher for anybody who valued him. And it's really frustrating to a series fan like myself, because these games have glaring holes in their performance. They never worked as well as they could do, but they still worked well, and they were still, for all their flaws, really fun games that I actually prefer than the newer ones, because there's a charm to them, you know, warts and all, that makes me feel like I'm playing a Splinter Cell and reminds me of all the nostalgia I have for this series. And the new ones play beautifully. They have none of the issues that these games do. Everything is tight, everything is polished, everything works as intended. If you make a mistake, it's generally you. It's never the controls, it's never wonky detection, it's never just, wow, this game is weird. It just works. Yet they got rid of all the other stuff that made the series great, and like, there's no split jumping anymore, there's none of the wall jumping stuff, there's not even Michael Ironside, it's just a completely different thing. And is it bad? Hell no. Blacklist was a fantastic game. I loved it. It was a great stealth game. It's just, it didn't feel like Splinter Cell to me. And these games do, even with, the amount of problems that they have. And just then you'll notice I went back and hid the bodies. I did that because when I got to this door, the alarm went off. And this game has this really strange system that really screwed me over when I was younger playing these titles. Because I played them all on the GameCube, and I played Chaos Theory, I think, on the PS2. And then Double Agent on the PS2, which turned out to be a completely different game when I got it on 360 and played it there. The story was different and everything, it was awesome. I was a massive Splinter Cell fan, I don't know if you notice. But what the game does is, if you don't hide a body that well, for instance, if a body's not in darkness and you go to the loading zone to the next area, regardless of if there are any guards left alive, it'll give you an alarm. And the alarms are, of course, bad things, because not only do they affect, your overall performance, but they change the way the missions work in the next areas, because enemies will be on alert and perhaps the patterns will change, they'll do different things. In the future games, it'll change what they're equipped with, and it'll make them more difficult to fight. They'll get armor, they'll probably get better weapons. It was a really interesting dynamic, and unfortunately, this game was the strictest that Splinter Cell ever was, so when you had a 0 alarms, stipulation, and you set off an alarm, Lambert would immediately scold you, and you'd fail, and there's nothing you can do. Just straight away, failed, game's done, see you later, goodbye. And there's a few objectives where you have to do things really quickly and respond and do what the game wants you to do, and this is not a game, made in 2010, this is not a game made in 2014 where everything is heavily signposted and it's pointing you to exactly what you need to do, and for the most, you get ample enough time to ever figure it out. This is a game which gives you 10 seconds to stick a camera in a window that's moving, and if you don't do it correctly and keep the conversation going, which can be quite tricky because the detection's not the best, immediately Lambert's like, "You're suck dick, Fisher, you're done." And you're like, whoa, what did I do? And it can happen a lot. You'd be surprised. It's really funny just how strict the game can be. But it makes it feel more satisfying when you do get it right. It can be really frustrating, and it should have been better. But when you finally do get it, you breathe that sigh of relief, and you're like, wow, I did it. And you feel something. It's what makes them great. Like, I've played pretty much every stealth game that's came out post this game, within reason. And before these games, stealth games were vastly different. Like, you look at your Metal Gears, and you look at your Tenchus, and you look at your Thieves on PC, they were different games, and this came along and it did a lot of really interesting things. I mean, it was already an established formula of things it did, but it did it really well, and especially with the emphasis on the realistic lighting, which I use, you know, sparingly, because some of the lighting is weird as shit, but just this ability to be unseen when enemies were so close to you, I'd never really felt it before, and I never truly appreciated it when I first played, because I was of the mindset of, you know, a stupid kid who, if there was enemies in a level, I had to kill them before I carried on, so I would, you know, always kill stuff. The notion of sneaking past them didn't really apply too much unless you had to. And even then, it never really occurred. Maybe I should use that strategy in the other levels. I just kind of wanted to get back to taking them out and sneaking forward to see who else had to be took out. And it's fun coming back and seeing these games work a lot better than I remember them working, because at the time, I just wasn't the right mentality for stealth because I was young and I was impatient, and I'm having a ton of fun going back to these games, and this is the first of 3 that I intend to cover. And I know there's probably a few of you that wish I was covering things along the lines of the new Assassin's Creed or, you know, the Far Cry 4 and things like that, but I'm doing Splinter Cell. You know, my channel is always this way. I do what I enjoy and I do things that I want to do, and it's not for everybody. And that's not a problem. You know, YouTube is a big place. There's plenty of other things if this is not what you want to watch. And that's the great thing about it, guys. But thank you very much for watching and listening. And you take care now.